Thank you so much for tuning into Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. I'm your host, as always, Christian D. Evans. And guys, we have a very special guest on today. We're going to be talking about a lot about private equity and really buying and acquiring small to mid-sized businesses and how to navigate this whole region and what that looks like regarding to navigation of deal flow, regarding the resources, regarding the structure of the deal flow, as well as really just making sure that you find the right due diligence and the underwriting of these companies. He is a private equity investor, venture capitalist, technology entrepreneur. He's the founder and CEO of Garden City Equity, a people first holding company that buys and holds blue and white collar businesses from owners seeking liquidity. Now, their vision is to honor God by building the best holding company in the world where all workers thrive. Their approach, they're people first. They have no intention of selling their businesses. They use minimal debt, which we're going to be talking about actually very interesting at a deeper level. And they keep the management team in place and keep the diligent process simple. Please welcome my next guest, the one and only Michael Arrieta. How you doing today, Michael?
Doing great, Christian. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Man, I am looking forward to this as well because you just got off this amazing event. We were just talking offline and just excited for you in 2023, late 2023 and 2024, man. But one of the things I want to share with you real quick is you said something, you posted something on LinkedIn, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So I'm going to read it and I want to get your thoughts on it. If you look to others for fulfillment, you will never be fulfilled. If your happiness depends on money, possessions, experiences, you will never be happy with yourself. Be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, you are now on the journey towards true freedom and joy.
Yes, yes, and yes. That's probably been the biggest thesis and the biggest summary of what I've been walking through about the last 10 years was that's my life story, right? Just chasing the things that this world always says to chase, bigger, better, right? Chasing pride, pleasures, and possessions, right? Those are the three things that every man has chased since the beginning of time. And it's also been the destruction of man since the beginning of time. So they chase pride because, we look at ourselves and we have a lot of little boy, little kid insecurities. So we try to beat our chest and we try to tell ourselves and tell others that we matter more than we really do. We try to chase pleasures because we think that will be fulfillment, but it's just very short-term fulfillment. Hence why data shows that we get more fulfillment from actually booking a trip and planning a trip than actually being on the trip. That shows that there's something inherently wrong with ourselves, our internal selves, right? And then possessions, thinking that something that's monetary, something that's physical, something that you could actually touch and feel, thinking that could actually give us contentment, thinking that's something that could actually give us joy. And as we know, it just doesn't, right? And so what do you do with all that? Well, you seek and send contentment. You seek instead to see that everything you have is actually a blessing, right? That if you just have a cold, at least you're breathing. That if you have a 2-bedroom house, at least you have shelter. That if you had one meal, that at least you have food in your system, right? That if you have one child, but you couldn't have two, at least you have the blessing to raise one. And so you just wake up every day and you thank the Lord for what you do have and being content for what you do have. And that right there is a place of freedom. And once you're free, boy, that's where joy starts.
That's awesome. And do you find definitely today's culture, like you mentioned at the beginning, where you have these dreams, these goals, these ambitions, and you think about those all the time and you want to accomplish, like you mentioned, just more impact, more influence, more whatever it may be. But also, like you mentioned, you also have to be cognizant or intentional on being grateful for what you do have, because if you lopside one side over the other, then it becomes too lopsided in essence. And how do you stay kind of even keeled in that regard to have this? I have goals, dreams, ambition, constantly moving forward, but also being content and making sure that there's that intentionality in your life or day-to-day operations or weekly operations to say, you know what, I see what I have been given, and that kind of mindset. How do you have that even keeled during your growth?
Humility. It's all about humility and starting with not thinking too highly or too lowly of yourself, right? And so I have big goals, right? I have big goals, personal goals, business goals, financial goals, spiritual goals, mental, emotional, all of them, right? I have big goals, and without goals, people perish, right? Without purpose, people perish. And so I strive for those goals, and I strive to think big, and I strive for excellence, right? That's something I absolutely strive for. but at the same time, knowing that my identity does not come from the progress of reaching or not reaching those goals. And if I do reach those goals, realizing that that's not my identity either. So I'm constantly looking for ways that I could pop my own bubble every single day, every single day, every single day, just looking for ways that I show either by words that I choose to say that doesn't make me sound too professional, either by word, by the background of this Zoom call. I could show you a different background right now that shows way different, that makes me look way more impressive, right? And by intentionally choosing to humble yourself. I bought a car that I really wanted, and then I had suede seats, and it had Bang& Olufsen headrests, and I mean, ridiculous. And then I thought about it, and I go, this is the path, right, towards trying to get my joy from possessions, right? And so I'm still driven. I'm still going to drive and accomplish great things. But the question is, how do I deny myself the things that the flesh wants, the things that the flesh will get its identity and its worth from? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And just always being aware or conscious that, hey, you know what? You got to be intentional with the path that you're on. And like you said, deny what you really truly desire in regards to that flesh side of things, which is awesome. Have you always had this kind of worldview in the way you structure your business with your friends, the family, even your investors, in regards to building these worldview as well as your values accordingly? Has that, or has that been an evolution in regards to integrating it in a holistic view?
Yeah. Ever since I was young, I've always had this weird reality that life is a book. Some people obviously call it a mist or a fog, or it goes like the wind. But I've always had this clear reality that life is a book. And when you're born, you're on page one, and we all have the last page, every single one of us. And we all know that every single second that goes by, every day that goes by, you're getting closer to that last page. And you don't know, Christian, if your book is the traditional book of the United States of America that's 300 pages, aka 85 years, right? Or you don't know if your book is 100 pages and a lot shorter, right? So I've always had this reality of how short life goes by, or how short life is. But I've never had the reality of realizing that I'm chasing pride, pleasures, and possessions, right? Or another one I chase is the other three G's: girls, gold, and glory, right? Very, very similar. So I've always been on that ruthless chase of figuring out, where can I get my purpose from, and what rocks can I turn over. And my goal was to become a millionaire by 30, right? My goal was to make six figures by the time I graduated college, like all those things. And I chased all those things. And if you chase those things, you will get those things, likely, especially if you want to kill yourself to get those things. So I was willing to kill myself at all costs to become a multimillionaire by 30. I was willing to kill myself to make six figures by the time I was 17. I was willing to kill myself to find a way to get to CEOs and get on private jets and go to 30 countries by the time I'm 31. All these things. And I did it, and I got there, and I'm like, it's still empty. Now I ruthlessly and unashamedly say, we all have a God-sized hole that I believe only God can fill. So we try to stuff a lot of stuff in that big hole that we have. And you kind of know already that hole I'm talking about. Every human being, I say this probably 5 times a week. I'm like, you probably have that God-sized hole that you're trying to fill stuff into. Maybe have another kid. Maybe renovate your house. No, a bigger house. No, a bigger house on the water. No, I don't know. It's the bigger boat. I live here in Jupiter, Florida, right? And that's kind of the talk in town. No, it's that trip. No, I got to go to Italy. No, I went to Italy, but I got to go on a cruise ride. And you just keep going. So we all have that God-sized hole. Then you meet some people that are like, no, I don't need any of that. I'm content today. I could die today. I'm happy. And the difference that I figured out is that common denominator that most people have is that they say, I find my faith in things that are unseen. I tasted and now I'm filled. And for me, that was my faith in God.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate the transparency in that. One of my mentors always said, "Be content, but not complacent." And I always love that
Yeah.
mindset. Content is just like you just mentioned, in regards to the way you think about it, but also complacency is, "Oh, I'm fine. I won't move forward from it." No, you want to move forward. You want to keep pushing, but also be content in the path and the journey. So I appreciate that. That's why I wanted to start out this podcast with that. I just thought that was really cool and really needed for what we're talking about,
One of my
holistic.
mentors, Christian, said, I told him once, I was like, so I feel like I don't even care anymore. Like, I feel like I don't care about things anymore. I feel right. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You should actually care more deeply than you ever have. It's that you don't worry anymore. That's the difference. Is before you were worrying about everything. Now you don't worry, but you still care.
Ooh, I like that. Just a small differentiation, but makes a world of difference. Oh my gosh. Well, man, hey, I want to talk a little bit about business a little bit. I find your thesis very interesting. So, some things you should say on your website, gardencityequity.com. Strong profits. We seek 2 to 8 million EBITDA. Competitive edge. We're going to be unpacking that a little bit. Solid team, of course. Enduring operations. 5 years of profitable operations. Healthy margins. High integrity. One thing I really want to dive into specifically is you actually acquire these companies with little to no debt. And I actually find that very interesting because obviously there's this huge ecosystem that, hey, leverage debt when it's cheap and whatever, and then obviously overcome that company with a lot of debt and so forth and grow like crazy. And that's the Silicon Valley kind of thing, right? Burn cash and then grow and market penetration. And yours is a little unorthodox, right? But obviously still very sustainable and successful. First of all, where did that idea come from? Has it just aligned with the way you think about the worldview? And then also, how do you structure and navigate that accordingly?
Yeah, for me, I was always a fan and frequent listener of Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway. Of, I mean, I was the first one in my family to go to college, besides my sisters, and I've never really had a high sophistication of financial engineering and doing all the fancy McKinsey, B school, all that stuff. So for me, I'm like, man, this Warren Buffett guy, he's like, I really like See's Candy, or I really like American Express, or I really like Coca-Cola, or I really like Dairy Queen. I'm going to call the CEO and I'm going to tell him I don't want to put a bunch of debt on your business because now you have to service that debt. Now the money that's going to servicing the bank debt is going and it's now not being able to be invested in growth opportunities, right? So I'm going to keep diligence really easy. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to tell you what the business is worth. I'm going to tell you why it'd be a hands-off, easy partner. Our dollars are going to be dollars, going to be equity, and we're just going to help come alongside and grow the business. And for me, that always really clicked. I was like, that makes sense. That's easy. I get that. And so after my last company, um, after my last technology company, I just basically said I love operating family-owned, founder-owned businesses that have been around for decades that make millions of dollars of profits. I'm sure these people need to sell their business. I found out there is something called a silver tsunami that hundreds of thousands of businesses are being sold and they need someone to buy them. And I said, well, why not just take the Warren Buffett approach into these small and mid-sized companies? So we don't like debt, especially in this current environment that debt is currently running 8% plus. You can make an argument for it, obviously, at 2%, 3%, right? And maybe that's a mistake. Maybe we should have took on some debt at that very low interest rate environment. But for us, we could withhold the storms. We could withhold cyclicality, right? We could ride through the waves because we don't have the debt covenants to worry about. So essentially, we can never go bankrupt so long that we could just continue the revenue coming, right?
Which makes perfect sense in regards to the way you think about it. And so I'm curious, let's say, for example, there are certain businesses out there that have a little heavier on debt, right? That are eating up their margins a little bit. We've kind of seen that now because obviously, like you mentioned just recently, there has been a lot of valuations decrease just in Silicon Valley, but holistically, we've seen some kind of valuations decrease in a lot of different, verticals. And then obviously also a lot of individuals are heavy on debt because, like you mentioned, cash was very available, loans were very available, et cetera. And that's not good or bad. It is what it is. And so I would imagine there's a lot of good opportunities right now, but they may be a little heavier on debt. When you're looking at doing due diligence and underwriting, maybe they have some potential good margins. Maybe they have a good defensible moat. But I'm just trying to figure out how Michael thinks about a business. Where do you weigh everything equal, or are there certain things in your thesis that you weigh a little heavier than others? How do you navigate that story that the data and the underwriting process brings to you?
Yeah, things are absolutely not weighed equally. We have a very simple scorecard. Some things are weighed 30%, some things are weighed 10%, right? So things that are weighted much higher is the leader. A is the leader. Basically, is there a great leader that we're buying this business with? So we just bought a business a couple months ago called Wathco. and they renovate and remodel fast food and fast casual dining restaurants. So their clients are the behemoths that own Sonic and Buffalo Wild Wings, Chick-fil-A, and all those type, right? It's not the onesies and twosies guy that owns four units. It's the places that own 7,000 units that have to remodel 500 in a year. So we love that thesis. It's non-cyclical. These businesses are always going to have to be remodeled. Projects take 21 days, costs a couple $100,000. It's not a big GC that the project's $3 million with bonding. It's not that, right? So we like it. But the biggest thing that's weighing the most is, do we inherit a great leader? So this leader was willing to stay on board. He was willing to roll over a lot of equity. So he cares a lot. He didn't, if before he owned 100%, now he owns a minority stake. It's not 10%, it's not 5%. There's still a significant stake. So he cares a lot. So huge check mark. The leader that got the business where it's at, it's a leader that's going to stay with us. But then we have other businesses that we bought. The one before that was a business called Connects. The leader wanted to get out. He wanted to retire. He's done well. He's had a lot of businesses, but he had a wonderful GM. So that GM was going to stay on, and he was going to become a great leader in the business that he was already running the business. So huge check mark. I would say, Christian, 99% of the deals we say no to is that we do not inherit a great leader. And we don't want to go and gamble. We don't want to go and say, it's a great industry, great margins, great competitive moat, great brand, whatever it is. And now we got to go gamble and find the right leader to bring into this culture. It's just not us. So we don't want to deal with that. So for us, that is sacrosanct and very critical to the investment thesis. Another one is the management team. So sometimes you have a great leader, but there's no team, right? And it's just a bunch of doers and not a lot of people that work on the business versus in the business. That's another one that weighs significantly. Different than just a single leader, it's a strong non-owner management team, right? Another one that's very, very critical is do they offer a B2B service? For us, as you know who our investors are, we have 60, 70 of kind of the who's who. These investors could open up massive doors for us. So we own a consumer pool business, right? They build and service pools in South Florida. Our bigwig investors can't open any doors to help us double revenue, right? Maybe they know one person that needs a pool in South Florida. But when you look at other businesses that are B2B, they can open doors left and right that really helps us scale. So that gives you a little bit of a taste. And then there's other things. They have to be around for 7+ years, double-digit net margins, right? It can't be lumpy earnings. It can't be a business that made 1 million, 7 million, 3 million, 10 million, right?
Okay, so this is excellent. And we're going to be talking about strategic partnerships that you've been able to create with some of your LPs, which I find very interesting. But I want to loop back around on the team structure. I have talked a lot offline with a lot of businesses and how they structure their team for an acquisition. When you found that team and you're like, okay, I want to keep them on, but I want to ensure and mitigate my risk so that they don't like quit, 6 months or 8 months or whatever. You want to make sure that it's a smooth transition, smooth transaction from, obviously someone that's taking ownership of that company and so forth. So how do you ensure when you find those teams and you say, okay, that is heavy weighted, of course, just like you mentioned, and you're like, okay, I found the right individuals that are, facilitating this. This is good, smooth stuff going on. Now, do you put in a contract, or is it in part of the contract to ensure that, hey, maybe there's some sweat equity that's established or some performance bonus associated or some equity earnout, et cetera? How do you guys structure it where you are able to mitigate that loss so that you ensure that, okay, well, at least we know the next 2-3 years, this executive team or this leadership team will be on so that we can really, anticipate the growth, et cetera? What does that look like?
If you want people to think like owners, you need to pay them like owners. That's simple, right? We all see companies all the time that were like, why don't their managers go above and beyond? Why don't their blah, blah, blah? Because you want them to think like an owner when they're not. It's that simple. You're paying them and treating them like an employee, like a cog in the wheel, right? But then you want them to think like they should care about profit when they're not incentivized on profit. So any one of our key leaders on our management team have ownership of the company. That's the way it rolls. So they all have equity in the business. And the other thing that you might think of is like, well, is for I'm not going to mention any titles in case any of our management teams hear this, but for a CXO, right, is 1% really going to move the needle? Well, let me ask you, if a company makes $5 million a year, 1% of that's $50,000 a year. So is an extra $50,000 a lot? especially that company grows to 6 million EBITDA, 7, 8, 10. Now they're making an extra 100 grand a year. And then think about this. You have a enterprise mindset or a good degree, and you think, man, it's only 1%, it's only 50 grand. These people in lower middle market are not going to be able to go to another lower middle market, small to mid-sized company and ask for equity, because all these companies are privately owned. If they go somewhere else, these owners, they hold on to the equity as hard as they humanly can, right? So a CXO in one of our companies that we just awarded them equity is now bought in, realizing that we care for them and we want them to be thought like an owner. We want them to treat them like an owner. If they ever try to go somewhere else, other small businesses are not going to give up equity for them, because small businesses think in small ways, unfortunately, at times.
Dude, that's incredible. And I love what you said there. When you're an owner, you just drastically think different. If you're renting a car, it's not yours. Who cares? It can get binged and dinged and whatever. But all of a sudden, you park differently in the grocery store when it's yours. Your BMW out there, you park a little further away from all the carts and stuff. So I love that analogy. I want to ask also, so I was underwriting a business we were going to invest into. And the thing is the executive team, one of the co-founders, they no longer work with the company, but he owned about 26% of the equity. And that was kind of, I shouldn't say a red flag, but it was a yellow flag. And I was like, okay, let's unpack this a little bit further. What's happening? Are they still on good terms? What exactly happened? And then I chose not to invest in the company mainly due to that fact. After I unpacked a little bit further in that regard, I'm curious with that kind of case scenario, and that's kind of very contextual, but I've seen this quite a bit actually,
All the
where
time.
all the time. Is that a red flag, or is it more of just saying, hey, let's learn a little bit more about this, and how do you kind of navigate this? Or is it more like, hey, we'll write a check, but we want to make sure that at least some of this money's going off, getting that guy off the cap table, et cetera, to make sure
Yeah,
that he doesn't.
you're asking really, really. I mean, I've done 50 podcasts, and people don't ask these sort of questions. You're asking questions I wish I knew years ago. What you just nailed on is probably one of the common denominators of deals that don't happen. I'm thinking of so many right now. I'm thinking of so many deals. I mean, there's a flooring company, a commercial flooring company that the CEO owns about 25-35% of the company. He should own the whole thing. But when he started the business, there was an interior designer that she was like, I can help out. And then her husband was a finance guy. He's like, I can help out. So it was like a third, right? And when you start a company like that, you don't ever think it's going to be anything. You obviously don't hire real attorneys. A third. We're all going to contribute because we're going to be fair. And then you fast forward 25, 30 years. And by the way, on year 7, you were kind of like, maybe I should buy them out. Ooh, that's $400,000 now, or $100,000, right? Maybe later. Well, they're still adding a little bit of value, maybe. And then you get to year 25, and you're like, you made $5 million last year, and you made 1.5, and they made 1.5, and they made 1.5. Yet they haven't been in the business at all for 15 years. Like, what are you doing? And then they're like, well, if I go start my own business, they might sue me, or I want to sell to you and roll over all of my equity because I want to partner with you because we can grow this thing. But then they are going to want to take it to market because they want to get a higher offer, right? So it gets messy. Or there's another company, an HVAC company, that he and his buddy founded, and half the company was owned by the buddy that founded it, because he was like, you found it, you put in some equity, you gave it to me, I'll run it every day. Now it's years later, he's running it every day, he's skyrocketed. He's like, that guy needs to get out. That guy's like, I'm not willing to get out. So it's messy, Christian. So the issue is what we say, I'll answer it this way. If there's one owner, there's a high probability that the deal gets done. 2 owners, there's a less of a probability the deal gets done. 3 owners, there's no chance the deal gets done, right? And so everyone tries to give me a bunch of answers. No. My partners and I are aligned. Oh, no. It's like, I've never seen it happen yet. I haven't seen it happen yet. And so net is, it's difficult if there's more than one owner. It's even more difficult if you have owners that are not actively involved, yet they're getting the cash flow. If I was in that shoe and I owned 50%, 25% of a business, and I'm getting my cash flow every year, and I have the other guy working for me, that he's getting the phone calls and the emails, and I'm at home and I'm getting paid just as much as him, Why in the world would I ever want to sell? Even if they want to sell me out and be like, no, I don't want to, right? That's what the agreement says, right? Unless you actually see what's best for the company, which is really, really difficult.
So with that fact, and you said, just like you mentioned, when you find some three individuals that own it, even though it may look really good and sexy and whatever, that's kind of you're not going to invest in that company. Is that correct? Because there's a low probability that that will get over the
We
hurdle. You guys
would.
won't.
We
Okay.
would if you have an owner that use a flooring company, three owners. He's great CEO, great culture fit. He's young. He wants to roll on all of his equity. He's like, my 33%. I don't want to take $1 out. I want to be in partnership with you. You buy out my other two partners. Why wouldn't we want to do that? They're inactive. We'll be active, but they can't get consensus because why would they sell? And if they do want to sell, they're telling that guy, we should sell for 10 times EBITDA. And the CEO's like, we're a flooring installer. We should sell for 4.5, max 5 times EBITDA, right? And they're saying, well, if it's not 10, I won't sell. So, AKA, I'm liking the money coming in. Unless you give me a ridiculous offer, I'm not selling. So we would buy it, absolutely. But the thing is, you can't get consensus unless you're just willing to give a crazy asinine offer.
Okay, that makes sense. I appreciate giving a little bit more color on that. You were just talking about kind of the 5x and the 10x kind of EBITDA. Those are multiples on the back end. And of course, you guys don't, one of the things you guys mentioned here is you guys don't sell later on. So with that being said, on the front end then, do you avoid certain verticals or industries that have a low EBITDA multiple on the back end? Or is that not really a factor when you're kind of doing that process? Because you're not really anticipating an exit.
Yeah, ignore the back end. So what you're referring to is front end, X companies wanting to sell. That's the front end multiple. So a taco truck makes $10 million of revenue a year, makes $1 million of profit a year, has $9 million of costs, so makes $1 million of profit. That EBITDA of that company, the cash flow, the net profit, whatever you want to call it, is $1 million of EBITDA. What EBITDA multiple do you apply to that business? And then what you're referring to is obviously on the back end of when you're wanting to sell that company, right? Is that multiple going to be higher if you grow that taco truck, or is it always going to be a low multiple? We don't care about the exit multiple because we're not exiting, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we do care of though is the opposite question you just asked. We care about what's happening in the market. That entry multiples are skyrocketing. So I'll give you an example. HVAC companies, right? 3-4 years ago, people were like, they're HVAC companies. People need HVAC, and that's great. And a lot of the revenue comes from new construction, new builds, because that's when a lot of units get installed. But then you see some really good companies that are selling a lot of service contracts, so reoccurring revenue. And you see companies with really good moats that they're like the HVAC company of their town here in Jupiter, right? And they do reinstall, they do service, they do new construction, nice blend. And people are saying that's non-cyclical. People would rather have air conditioning than water, And it's like, this is a genius industry. It's not a nice to have, it's a must have. So then private equity wakes up to it. And private equity, the big guys, the HIGs, the Trivest, the Jordan companies, the multi-billion-dollar funds are like, HVAC's where it's at. And they go from 4, 5, maybe even 6 times EBITDA. 6, 7, 8, 9,
Supply
10.
and demand.
10 times for an
Jeez.
HVAC company. So the way they're seeing it though is, the watermark has now risen to 10 times EBITDA. So if we buy this HVAC company in Jupiter, Florida that does 5 million of EBITDA, we buy it for 10 times for $50 million, right? If we just grow it a little bit and it grows to 7 million of EBITDA, 8 million of EBITDA, we could probably sell it for 11 or 12 times because one of the other big guys are going to buy it, right? So for us, we cannot buy a business for 11 or 12 times or 10 times because we're not selling it. We don't have the multiple arbitrage to flip it to someone. So if there's industries that private equity is just waking up and wanting to pay crazy boku's amount of money for, we don't compete in those.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. You're really looking at the macro stuff going on, and you're really articulating, okay, is there going to be a lot of alpha? Because like you mentioned, it's not this concept, most private equity where it's, hey, we're going to buy at an okay price, and we're going to, obviously put a lot of debt on it, explode that, and then obviously sell it and flip it with a higher multiple, et cetera. That thesis is drastic because you're not looking to exit at that back end, which makes sense. You're looking to cash flow, and that's the whole optimal, really decreasing expenses. So I want to get a little bit more micro in this. So when there's really only a few ways to really grow a business, obviously increase prices, sell your current customers more stuff, or really get more new customers, right? Those are the three really the paths. Or there's obviously other growth trajectories as well to increase the margins as well. You can decrease the expenses. And like I mentioned, obviously increase prices and so forth. When you're looking at this operationally, what are certain things? And I know this is very contextual, so you could share us maybe a story or an example. When you acquire a company, you have that conversation, everything's good, then that's where the work really starts. Now let's see how we can make this an efficient business and really start, growing that. What are the certain steps or the methodology that you walk the team through, the company through, to ensure that everybody's on the same page and saying, okay, this is where we're going to start, and this is what our 18-month, 24-month goal looks like in regards to kind of cadence?
So we have a methodology and we have a playbook. The methodology is 4 things, and the playbook's 4 things. The methodology, number 1, keep your loyal customers. Don't lose your loyal customers. Keep the book of business. Number 2, find new customers. Go out and find new customers that need your product or service. Number 3, get them to spend as much as humanly possible, right? Maximize their spend. Number 4 is seek efficiencies, not savings, efficiencies. Savings, many times, you're reducing or you're sacrificing service, right? Efficiencies is obviously keeping the same service, but having the inputs be different for the same or better output. Okay. So those are the 4. What you typically see when a new buyer comes in is it flips, right? It totally flips. Number 1's like, look for efficiencies, or better yet, look for savings. Like, where can we cut? To use a hotel example, if you buy a hotel, you're like, they're using thick towels, go to skinnier towels. They're going big bouquets, go smaller bouquets. They have big bar soaps, go to skinnier soaps, right? That's savings. Efficiency says, how do we get people to spend more money? Catering's lower. How can we have more catering? By letting people know our offering's better, or catering's going down. Is it because right now catering's taking too long because they're getting stuck on elevators? How can we actually add another elevator? You look for efficiencies to drive outputs, right? And then they finally say, how can we charge more prices? And then they say, how can we actually look for new customers? Oh, and we have existing customers. So we say, keep them, look for new ones, get them to spend as much, and look for efficiencies. And then the playbook that we operate is build a high-performance leadership team. So these small to mid-sized companies are very, very understaffed. So for the most part, some are overstaffed, but for the most part, they're understaffed. You see the CEO or president wear a lot of different hats. So sometimes it's like, hey, Mr. President, Mr. CEO, we need you to focus on the vision and the strategy and the budget and the culture. We don't need you focused on project management. We don't need you focused on answering all the sales calls. So right now in our janitorial business, we're hiring our first ever in 40, 50 years the company's been around, sales leader. They've never had a salesperson. They've never had a sales leader. They only answer the phones. They're the number 1 commercial janitorial company in Eastern Tennessee, based in Knoxville. And they've never had a salesperson, Christian. It's just word of mouth. So the CEO answers the call and says, sure, we could bid for UT Knoxville, or sure, we could bid for this hospital system. Drives there, bids on it, then goes back and answers the complaint calls. They're a great business, but shouldn't we hire a high performance leadership team? Shouldn't we hire a head of training for the 400 cleaners we have, right? So that's number 1, build a high performance leadership team. Number 2 is set your charter, strategy, and budget. So what's your charter? What's your vision? What's your mission? What's your values? What's your annual budget? And what's the strategy that you're executing on this year? Number 3, empowerment and accountability. So that's the cadence we have. Every 2 weeks, we have a call with our CEOs. Every month, we have a monthly review. Every quarter, we have a quarterly board meeting. Every year, we have an annual retreat with them, right? So that's the accountability and empowerment. And then number 4 is we support critical processes and systems. So these are the things that say, hey, we need a new ERP. We don't even know what ERP stands for. We don't know where to look for one. We don't know how to install it. We're a small to mid-sized company. Garden City, you guys are fancy. Can you help us out? Right? So that's our methodology, and that's our playbook.
Wow, that's incredible, incredible. So I want to double click on something you mentioned there in regards to efficiencies. I love the way you thought about that, and I appreciate you kind of making that differentiation between saving, right, small bar of soap, between to efficiency, where it's like, hey, how do we look at this and say, hey, how can we grow this at a higher maximal? Now, I want to ask you this because I'm always intrigued with, acquisition in regards to when you acquire a company, but also acquire other services that this individual may need down the road. So you're upselling these individuals. But my question though is, how do you guys think about this in regards to, hey, should we have this in-house or should we just have a joint venture that could also be a supplemental kind of revenue stream, but we don't have to have the whole in-house team, et cetera. So
The,
how do you look at that?
it all depends the bandwidth, expertise, the bandwidth and the expertise that your leadership team has. That's really what it comes down to. Can they actually ingest this and can they actually pull it off? So we have a business. We have a pool business in South Florida that is a pool business that's trying to be the best pool builder in the state of Florida. That's what their mission is. They are trying to be excellent. They're trying to put customers first. They're trying to have a growth mindset. Waking up and standing up a turf team and a pergola team and a pavers team and a fence team is a distraction. So that's a joint venture. That's let's go find the best turf company. That's all they do and get them to do that. Because you need warehouses, you need to store all the different rolls of turf, you need different machinery. Okay, fence. It's a whole different permitting, it's a whole different installation. So in all these different things in that business, we're like, no. We're gonna do pools, we're gonna refer it out. We're gonna be smart when we refer it out. We'll have an affiliate model, we'll get a commission paid back, we'll et cetera, et cetera. But then you have other businesses, right? Like our janitorial company, take it, that they clean the places, and these people are going and they're getting floor polishers. So other companies are coming in to polish our floors. We're like, well, how much is the floor polisher machine? It's $5,000 each. Well, can our cleaners operate it? It's like, yeah, our cleaners can operate it. Absolutely. It's like, well, congratulations. Now we just have a brand new division of the company that the same people do in the same locations on their same weekly cadence already. So that's an addition. Now we had a business, Christian, in that company that was a water damage and restoration business. So we bought the business and we said, how much of our revenue is coming from water damage restoration? It was a couple $100,000. And then we started hearing late night phone calls, big warehousing, tons of equipment just being stored there, distraction for the team, stress, deal with insurance, deal with adjusters. Do we really want to be in that? Right? So as I say it is it a, do you want fries with that motion? Or is it that you want an entire different meal? If you want fries with that motion, we could offer that, right? Do you want fries with that? If you're already getting chicken nuggets, we could throw the fries right in there, right? But if you're ordering chicken nuggets and then you also want, a hot dog, it seems like it's pretty similar. It seems like it should be under the same roof, but it's not. It's different. It's different buns. It's different everything, right? That's going to be a different shop, right? And so it feels almost as similar, but it's not. So you
Michael,
just have to have a lot of conversations about that.
I love that. I love that analogy, by the way. That's beautiful way you said that. But also, I think it's so interesting how you think about that process because, like you said, it can be easily distracting. And then all of a sudden, I've seen companies do that where they're doing amazing top line, but they get distracted or CEOs and like, hey, let's go ahead and add this on here because our customers are asking for it. But like you mentioned, it's just adding too much complexity when the reality is you should have just joint ventured it out or something like that, had a collaborative, and then focus on your thesis that, the big one and really scale to the moon. So it's just very interesting. So I appreciate you kind of sharing that kind of example, a beautiful example, by the way, for both of those situations.
Devil's
Now,
in the details. Devil's in the details. I mean, even right now we're talking about the floor polishing one, right? And one of the biggest questions that came up was like, ooh, no, how are they going to get that big machine back and forth? And it's like, wait a minute. If we only offer this for our biggest customers, they have closets there. They might be able to allow us to store it in there. Check mark, right? So devils are in the details of, are you standing up an entire new business that's a distraction and you don't have the management team with the time or expertise to actually roll it out? Or is it do you want fries with that you could actually empower your people, teach them something new, and now you could have a cross-sell motion?
That makes sense. So let me ask you this also. So you come alongside a lot of these businesses are depending upon the top line. I mean, obviously 5 to 10 to $25 million, depending upon where they're at structurally and so forth. With that being said, they have a baseline of clients, right? And there's data in those clients. And as the company evolves and obviously gets wealthier and so forth and grows, et cetera, you have a bigger base of clients. And from there, I've heard some CEOs where they do that 80-20 rule. They look at it, they identify but what are their best clients, right? The ones that take less amount of time, that pay the most, and then you're able to isolate that and create an avatar, right? And the evolution of your client, if you will, and how you have to service those top tier individuals, because again, you want to maximize your profits. Are there certain tiers, if you will, when you kind of do that? Is it like every 18, 24 months where, okay, let's look back into that data, let's look into that, what are our best clients, et cetera, and really optimize and like, again, building an efficient business side of things? Or how do you guys structure that? Or is that not really kind of top of mind throughout the journey of, adding more clients onto the base?
You're kind of frustrating me right now and getting me upset because it's like, yes, I want that. And yes, that is wise and that is prudent and that is sophisticated leadership, right? Of what you're talking about. But one of my dear friends told me, Mike, all the things, all the fancy things you learned in Silicon Valley and reading all these great leadership books and everything, just throw it out. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you'll never get to it. He's like, you'll never get to it because you're going to be putting duct tape and super glue to hold this thing together. And what you'll realize is you actually throw up pretty good returns because you'll be surprised as to what it actually takes to make money. And it's not all that much, right? So what I mean, Christian, is this, is like, I don't think one of our companies has ever shown us the 80-20 rule, or if they have, it's been a slide and it's definitely never been actually execution that they're sitting down in the management meetings with of saying, hey, here's our top customers. We want to ensure that of our 20% of customers, 80% of our revenue, we don't want customer concentration. It's not that. It's basically, hey, we just got this phone call. It's a big contract. We're going to be sure that we execute this contract, provide them great service, be an awesome provider. And we won the contract. And we made hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's awesome. Then we talk to this contract. And then now our team goes to the data and we could synthesize it and say, hey, 80% of your revenue is coming from 20%. So what I'm trying to say is almost all of it's reactive instead of proactive. All of it's almost just responding to what's happening in the business and actually having a sophisticated strategy to imply onto the business, which infuriates me and it gets me upset because one of our businesses, one of our greatest companies called Connects that installs IT hardware across companies that have hundreds or thousands of locations. So if you own thousands of grocery stores or gas stations or restaurants, you have a lot of technology all throughout there. Someone needs to install that there when you build them or renovate them or when you refresh your technology. So we have 10,000 field technicians that install that technology device, whatever, security cameras, access points, Wi-Fi, IoT, digital signage. And so I met with a company that's one of the biggest in the space. And they're a couple hundred million of revenue. We're shy of 100 million of revenue. And they're showing us top 10 customers make up 80% of our revenue. They spend X dollars per year. We're growing them by 15% a year. And I'm there thinking, God, I need to get a better leadership team in our companies. We need to change everything because this is the way a leadership team looks. They're $250 million of revenue. When we bought this company, we were shy of 50 million, right? So it's just two different things, that you scale to over time. You can't apply an enterprise strategy to a lower middle market company. And that was my pitch to my investors was, I'm going to apply all these DocuSign and Dell and Silicon Valley things and all into the lower middle market. And we're just trying to put out little fires still,
I love it, dude. I love it. So just be realistic with the situation where you're at and obviously focus on what's top of mind. And then at some point, a later stage, then you can obviously, apply those other things. It's not applicable right now. Just do what's necessary right now. So I appreciate that.
It's just true. It's true. I wish it was different. I want those. I want the sophistication. I want all that, but it's scrappy when you're making, less than $10 million a year.
Well, what I find interesting, and definitely with your years of experience, Michael, I would imagine you're able to look at a company very quickly, just like a funnel, and you're able to identify, okay, these are the tension points, and you say, okay, well, let's just focus on this for the next 18 months, like that one thing. And I'm curious, is that kind of how you guys structure it? It's like, okay, we
Kind of,
see
yeah.
maybe 7 or 10 things that could be fixed, but let's just focus on one, isolate that, let's get some data. Are we seeing that improvement? And then focus on another. Is that how you strategize?
Yes, that is where we currently are. Now, what happens is obviously whack-a-mole. So you just have to keep saying, hey, remember that one thing? Remember that one thing? Remember that one thing? Like now we're talking about three. Like, well, these other two are not that important, but I'm like, well, they're taking up a lot of time. So yes, to answer your question, it's like if you ask me about any one of my companies, I can tell you the one thing right now. Like, we need a COO. We need a head of sales. We need to win and keep this customer. We need to get profitable jobs for the month of what like there is kind of the one thing versus my last enterprise role or the board I sit on of Cambia that's a $15 billion business. We have six things, right? It's also 6,000 employees with a leadership team of 24 people, right?
Mhm. I love it. I love it. Now, I want to kind of pivot a little bit toward joint venture. This is something that you have really maximized. And I don't know if this was just an evolution in your own journey or if this is something that you've always kind of established. I'm a big believer in leveraging joint ventures and, just being able to open up each other's Rolodex in a relational aspect, right? And it could be a very beneficial thing both ways. You have some amazing people you've been able to work with, like Pat from CEO of Intel, Dan Cathy, of course, Chick-fil-A. You've got Cheryl Popeyes and KFC, former CEO. You also have the former CEO of Boeing. You have other individuals, board of DocuSign, Lyft, Costco as well, Maggie, John Maxwell, of course, Tim Tebow. Some of these individuals that are very joint and strategic advisors, but also strategic partners. And I'm curious because, like you just were mentioned, you can basically say, "Hey, this can really be amazing for certain grocery stores." I know, I guess, who you're working with, the owners of Publix, right? And so now all of a sudden that opens up a door to be able to facilitate a massive enterprise contract, et cetera. And right there, just from partnership with Garden City, you guys are able to increase the top line and margins and so forth just from that one relationship. So my question really is, you get it, it makes sense to you. Was that an evolution in regards to just the way you think about it, or has that just been something that's always been strategic in as Garden City's thesis?
I I was taught it when I was the chief of staff to our chairman and CEO at DocuSign, a gentleman named Keith Kroc. Keith Kroc told me, you align your corporate go-to-market strategy with your financial equity strategy. So you align your corporate go-to-market strategy with your financial equity fundraising strategy. And what he meant by that was, well, Mike, look around. In Silicon Valley, we had a lot of competitors at DocuSign. Now, fortunately, they're all kind of gone. But there was EchoSign, PandaDoc, HelloSign. There's Right Signature. There's just so many of them, that came through the years. And what he said was, look at who they're all fundraising from. And it was all the blue chip venture capital firms. He said they will not help them win in the market. We have a great product. People have capital. If we have enough quantity, we will get to enough dollars raised. So let's go to all the high net worth individuals that are the big wigs at these companies. And what we'll tell them is, we are DocuSign. We're electronic signature. We're going to be a multi-billion-dollar company someday. We're going to allow you, Mr. CEO of McDonald's, you, Mr. CEO of Equifax, you, CEO of General Motors, you, CEO of SAP, you, CEO of Microsoft, you, CEO of Salesforce.com, keep filling in the blanks, right? To invest. And if you invest, now you're on the cap table, and you want to know what their first phone call is going to be the day after we close? Michael Dell is going to be, how do we get into Dell to sell them millions of dollars per year of DocuSign? Now, he can't force it, but he could open the door. And if he opens the door, we're going to win that deal, right? And so we aligned our go-to-market strategy to our equity finance strategy. So if we had to raise $300 million, we would do everything in our power to raise as much as we can from value-add people. And then whatever was remaining, we would go to then the people that people would start with, the Kleiner Perkins, the Excel. I love you, Kleiner. I love you, Mary Meeker and Excel and Bain Capital. You were great, but the other people were value add, right? So we filled the rest of what we had to raise with the passive VCs. We started with the active VCs. We started with the active shareholders. What do you think that did when we went to market to the VCs and we told them, yeah, we've already raised 80 million from these people that are gonna help us win deals after we close? They would all want us all that much more. So I did the same thing at Garden City, where we don't have any institutional investors. We have no pension funds. I just called all my friends and said, you could help us grow these companies. You're looking for a good return. Let's marry both mission align and value add.
Unbelievable in the way you structure that, and then also leveraging their ecosystem, that Rolodex. But like you mentioned, you learn that at DocuSign, and it just catapults you massively into something like the stratosphere in a good sense, which is just I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see the investing world as well as definitely VC and PE. They just don't do a lot of joint ventures or collaboratives. They're very, what I've noticed, when they have their LPs, they do not share their LPs with anybody else. Even though
No,
those LPs may be interested in another thesis outside of their thesis, they just don't. And I just always found that very interesting. I just want to get your take on that because you're saying no as well.
no, you nailed it. You nailed it. And I will say, um, in security, so for me at Garden City, if here is never sharing your investors and here's sharing all your investors with everyone, I am like over here. Like I overly share. So I host a couple events per year. As you know, we host a shareholder summit. At our shareholder summit, there's a lot of other fund managers. Of our 70 shareholders, probably 50 of them or 40 of them are always looking to raise money for their company or their deals or their funds. And so I'm bringing them in a room with all my other shareholders, and I see what they're doing. They're flying out and meeting each other. They're following up on text messages. They're going hunting together. So what the world says is a scarcity mindset. That's the world. It's a scarcity mindset. Share of wallet, market share. Don't let them know each other are, because you have Christian D. Evans that he put $1 million in yours because he only knew that you existed. Now he knows that 5 others exist. So he's only going to do 200, 200, 200, 200. What I say is great, because he's going to love Garden City all that much more. That there's a family affair, that we chose abundance. Because you know what else is going to come from abundance mindset? Christian will probably also bring 5 other people, and will probably be his best firm, and will probably die for us, and he'll probably refer deals to us, and we'll be the nucleus of that. So that's our reputation. It might be wrong, and you might be a lot of people that call us stupid. But a quick story is 2 weeks ago, I hosted my shareholder summit. One of my lead investors, he runs a private equity fund, and he was hosting his shareholder summit the next week. I had 10 of my shareholders there that I invited, that at late night told me they were going to invest capital. I love that. Love that. But what do you think happened? He invited me to his shareholder summit. I probably met 15 new mission line people that want to invest in mine. So it's a virtuous cycle instead of a vicious cycle. I challenge people, try it out and see it. It takes guts though. It takes guts to actually believe in abundance versus scarcity.
I love it. I'm so glad you kind of put stop on that, because it is just so sad how there is just massive amounts of scarcity mindset. And like you mentioned, just you're on this side of the spectrum in regards to abundance, and just like it just abundantly clear of how much it gives back to you. Michael, I really appreciate you being on here, just sharing the way you guys think about mission, vision, ethos, and the way you structure it with your LPs and your equity investors, as well as the way you think about acquiring these companies, unpacking the way you think about an underwriting due diligence, right? If you're looking at a founding team and some own a little bit more and the 3, and then you say, hey, you know what, we're going to restructure that and whatever, and buy those other 2 out, and the way to have that conversation, that dialogue. Also unpacking the way you think about the really scaling and building efficiencies, and really being able to acquire more customers and all that process to be able to really grow the company. I really appreciate you just sharing today, Michael. For those that want to reach out to you, maybe just be part of what you got going on, maybe learn a little bit more about what you got going on. How do they reach out to you, my man?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about Garden City Equity, go to gardencityequity.com. You could learn about a bunch of stuff that we do on there, the type of companies we buy. If you have a company that you think fits, that does at least $3 million of EBITDA, of annual net true free owner earnings, free cash flow, there is something we have called the Deal Scout. a referral network that if you refer us a deal, you get paid $100,000 finder's fee plus $25,000 we donate to the charity of your choice. So you can do that. You can follow me on LinkedIn. And years ago, I stopped giving out my email because I realized that that's just people pleasing. We're one human. We only have X hours in the day. I have to prioritize my team and my family. And so I don't give out my email anymore unless it's just very dear friends that I'm trying to prioritize the time with friends, which is very opposite of how the world does it. So follow us on Garden City Equity. Follow me on LinkedIn. Send us deals. If there's a deal, you can send it to my deal guide, Nick at gardencityequity.com. And that's it.
Awesome. And guys, make it very simple. I'll put all those links in the description so you can reach out and connect with Michael here. Michael, I really appreciate you being on here. And I mean, there's been a lot of things that we've discussed. And I want to just give you these last few minutes. If there's anything else that you want to just add to our community and to our ecosystem, to our investors, those that are listening to our audience.
Yeah. Prioritize family 10 times more than you're prioritizing business and learning more about business and learning more about networking and learning more about structuring your deals or growth. Or, if you're addicted to podcasts and learning and reading and all this, where your heart is there, or where your mind is there, your heart is as well. And so if you're putting all your energy and mind towards learning about business, put it towards family, because the number one thing I've realized is with so many wise older mentors I have is how fast time flies by. And there's a great book called the five regrets of the dying. And the biggest thing to take away is just at the end of your life, you're never going to wish you made more. You're never going to wish you were smarter at business. You're just going to wish that you spent more time with those that you love deeply. And so that's a thing that unfortunately our world does not talk about enough. Our business leaders don't talk about enough. Podcasts don't talk about enough. Churches don't talk about enough. Everyone's just trying to selfishly get better. But just throw as much time and energy as you can to your family and those that you love.
That's a lot of wisdom right there, Michael, for how young you are. So I appreciate you being on here, man, and just sharing that. Guys, that is the CEO and founder of Garden City Equity, the one and only Michael Arrieta. Guys, that is Journey with Christian D. Evans podcast. Until next time, be uncommon if you can. Michael, my man.